Kurakhove direction, the Russian occupiers are trying to break through the Ukrainian defense in large groups and push the front line even further. As a result, they are met by Ukrainian air defense with drones, which ruthlessly destroys their equipment. The Russian occupiers were not prepared for such strong pressure from Ukrainian drones. The Russian occupiers were successfully defeated before realizing their intentions to seize new territory. Russians who are trying to seize Ukrainian land should realize that this is a one-way ticket. They will not return to Russia on their own 2 feet. Ukrainians are on their own land. They will ruthlessly destroy anyone who tries to take away their freedom. And this is the Ukrainian military in the Kursk region under smoke cover clearing landings, with the Russians using an Abrams tank and a Bradley armored anti-tank vehicle. In the Kharkiv sector, Ukrainian intelligence recorded the redeployment of Russian troops. Taking advantage of this moment, the Ukrainian military began destroying military equipment along with the occupiers. After a targeted strike on the Russians, the occupiers had to hide in a forest belt, but Ukrainian drone operators were able to find them there as well. A Russian tank spotted by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone hit a mine and completely detonated. This is a Russian truck with ammunition, which will detonate in a few seconds after a Ukrainian drone strike and make a big fireworks display. And this is Toretsk, Donetsk region. This building was mined by the Ukrainian military. The Russian occupiers, not knowing that there were explosives inside the building, occupied it. After that, the Ukrainian military remotely blew it up together with the occupiers. After the failed offensive, the Russian military tried to flee the battlefield in 2 tanks, but they were out of luck. The Ukrainian military used drones to shoot down 1 tank and then destroyed the next one. Here, Ukrainian drone operators noticed the redeployment of Russian troops. Seizing the moment, they destroyed 2 armored personnel carriers with the occupiers. And another Russian armored personnel carrier that was destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. Another Russian armored personnel carrier hit a Ukrainian mine and exploded. Only scrap metal remained of the armored vehicle. The Ukrainian town of Selidov, Russian military opened fire on a car with 2 civilians. The fire came from the direction of the bridge, where the Russian occupiers had set up an ambush. The passenger of the car was injured and could not move. 2 Ukrainian soldiers came out of the fortification to evacuate the civilians. One of them provided first aid. And the other Ukrainian serviceman provided fire cover. As a result of the coordinated actions, the civilians were successfully evacuated and the victim received medical assistance. This is another attempt by the Russian military to break through the Ukrainian front. The invaders' brigade consisted of 6 pieces of military equipment. The first tank in the convoy was a Russian tank that opened fire on Ukrainian positions. It was also the first to be hit by a Ukrainian javelin. But this time, the hit was weak and the tank continued to move. The Ukrainian military then loaded another charge and fired a control shot. The tank was neutralized. Then, a Ukrainian tank arrived on the battlefield and destroyed a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry with a well-aimed shot. The Russian military began to flee, but most of them were neutralized. A Russian convoy of 4 military vehicles, consisting of 2 tanks and 2 armored personnel carriers, was destroyed in the Pokrovsk direction. The occupiers tried to redeploy troops to attack the positions of Ukrainian defenders by surprise, but they were completely destroyed by kamikaze drones. A reconnaissance drone spotted an enemy tank on the horizon. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance transmitted the coordinates to the artillery, after which an accurate deadly charge was fired. And here is an example of the fact that in the Russian army, everyone is for themselves. These 2 Russian occupiers tried to escape from the battlefield on a motorcycle. One of them was wounded. In order not to burden the motorcycle, the other occupier decided to leave it on the battlefield. And this is another Russian convoy of 8 military vehicles trying to storm Ukrainian positions. One shot at a time, the defenders began to destroy the enemy's intentions. Ukrainian artillerymen fiercely began to strike, destroying all enemies along with their equipment. These 2 Russian tanks wanted to conduct reconnaissance in the Ukrainian-controlled territories. A Ukrainian crew on a German Leopard 2A4 tank drove out to meet them. It destroyed one Russian tank with a single shot and then began hunting for another. The Ukrainian tank managed to hit another Russian tank, but it withstood the attack and fled the battlefield. And this is the Ukrainian military conducting offensive operations in the Kursk sector. Using tanks, artillery, and drones, the Ukrainian military is successfully destroying the enemy. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spots a cluster of Russian occupiers, and Ukrainian artillery is sent to the same location, striking with conventional bombs and cluster munitions. After breaking through the first line of defense, the Ukrainian military is advancing further. At the same time, the Russians begin to pull together the rest of their troops. But Ukraine's defenders continue to destroy the enemy. This is already the Kharkiv region. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone destroys an enemy unit with a single hit under the tank's turret. Another destruction of the Russian occupiers. This Russian tank tried to fight against the Ukrainian military, but received a targeted charge from a drone. This Russian convoy tried to take Ukrainian positions with heavy artillery, but encountered Ukrainian resistance and was completely destroyed. Kharkiv direction, the occupiers tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses to seize new positions and create a new line of contact. The Ukrainian defenders met the Russian invaders with a worthy fight. Having spotted Russian equipment, Ukrainian soldiers began to raise kamikaze drones and set fire to Russian invading columns. It is clearly visible that one drone worth $500 completely burns heavy armored vehicles, with the help of which the Russian occupiers hope to seize Ukrainian territory. Sometimes it happens that a kamikaze drone cannot penetrate armored vehicles the first time. For complete destruction, another drone is needed. The Russian occupiers transported their ammunition on one-wheeled garden carts. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance spotted them and began destroying the ammunition and the dugouts in which they were hiding. After a shell was dropped from a Ukrainian drone, a handheld anti-tank grenade launcher caught fire near the Russian dugout. The fuse was strong, and due to the high temperature, it detonated, causing another explosion. Zaporizhzhia, direction of the front. Here, the Russian invaders wanted to capture Ukrainian positions with a large column of heavy equipment. 3 Russian tanks were spotted near a forest landing, moving towards the Ukrainian infantry. Kamikaze drones flew out to meet them. Enemy tanks that were in undercover ambushes were also detected and destroyed. And this is the Ukrainian military, having repelled the enemy's offensive, moving to counter-offensive actions and destroying the surviving equipment and personnel. Russian occupier tries to hide from Ukrainian drone among destroyed Ukrainian houses. An enemy howitzer is hidden here in a forest landing. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance managed to detect it and dropped 3 live rounds on it. Also, Zaporizhzhia direction, a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry was spotted by Ukrainian air reconnaissance. The drone operator first inspected the vehicle, and then, finding the weakest point, an open hatch leading to the armored personnel carrier, launched a kamikaze drone at the target. To finally destroy the target, the Ukrainian military fired another one. successfully executed. A Russian T-72 tank disguised behind trees was also destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. Here, the Ukrainian military is destroying Russian logistics. Now the Russians have started using civilian transport for their aggressive purposes. The mission to destroy the vehicle with shells was successful. Some Russian occupants tried to escape from the sector attacked by Ukrainians on motorcycles. Some of them tried to escape by shooting back with an assault rifle. But the Ukrainian military is ruthless to those who come to their land and want to destroy them. Russians should realize that nothing good awaits them here. Zaporizhzhia direction. Aggressive attempt by Russian occupants to seize Ukrainian positions using 8 armored vehicles. Ukrainians met the invaders with accurate kamikaze drone attacks on their equipment. Russian infantry was also detected and neutralized. Russian armored personnel carriers carrying another group of Russian infantry were also attacked. Ukrainians successfully repelled the assault, eliminating the occupiers and destroying their armored vehicles. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance spotted a tank on Ukrainian-controlled territory. A targeted shot was fired at it using a javelin. After a hit, the tank caught fire and completely burned down. Another Russian attempt to invade Ukrainian territory with heavy armored vehicles. Russian infantry arrives on the battlefield on a scooter. Russian stormtroopers climbed out of the hit armored vehicle and tried to hide in the woods. The two occupiers were carrying something on a unicycle. They did not even realize that they were under surveillance. Ukrainian drone pilots began to neutralize the Russian occupiers who had ambushed them in a destroyed house. Pokrovsk direction. Russians are aggressively trying to seize Ukrainian positions. A column of Russian armored vehicles moves toward the Ukrainian infantry. Ukrainian defenders meet it with artillery fire and attack with kamikaze drones. The first line of attack was successfully repelled. Later, another convoy of Russian tanks was spotted, which was immediately fired upon. The Russian military, not expecting such resistance, was forced to retreat, but Ukrainian drone operators did not stop attacking incessantly. Frightened, the Russians began to abandon their damaged equipment and ran to the forests. And another total destruction of a Russian column of armored vehicles. The Russians, facing fierce resistance from the Ukrainian military, are fleeing the battlefield faster than tanks to save their lives. An unsuccessful offensive for the Russians turned into a total defeat. Russian assault group tried to break through to Ukrainian positions using an armored personnel carrier. Their movement was spotted by Ukrainian intelligence. At the same time, the Ukrainian military waited for the best moment. And fired a precise shot from a javelin. Completely destroying the combat vehicle. And then we eliminated the entire enemy landing force. A Ukrainian drone spotted a Russian armored personnel carrier trying to assault Ukrainian positions. It is followed by 3 more that try to attack Ukrainian positions. The Russians were not expecting to drive into a minefield. The armored personnel carrier that was driving first also hit a mine. In this assault, the Russians were defeated, losing 4 armored personnel carriers and all crews. Another attack by a Russian assault group on Ukrainian positions. This time, Ukrainian kamikaze drone operators began destroying Russian equipment. Only a pile of metal remained of Russian vehicles. Russians who go to kill and destroy on foreign soil must understand that only darkness awaits them here. This is an armored vehicle of the Russian infantry, and there is another destroyed one nearby. A Ukrainian drone operator delivers an accurate strike and destroys enemy equipment. Here, Ukrainians in an M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle destroy Russian infantry and their artillery. A Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry leaves the shelter and immediately comes under fire from a Ukrainian M2 Bradley. The damage was not so serious, and the occupiers continued to move. After driving half a mile, the armored vehicle stopped, and then Ukrainian artillerymen and drone operators began to attack the target. This armored vehicle was supposed to pick up Russian infantrymen. Before reaching its destination, it was attacked by shells dropped by a Ukrainian drone. In addition, the path was blocked by other destroyed vehicles. The armored personnel carrier tried to turn around and go in the other direction, but the Ukrainian drone operator ruthlessly destroyed it. Another destruction of a Russian armored personnel carrier. In the Donetsk region, Russians tried to break through the Ukrainian defense in small groups from different directions. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance spotted the enemy and launched kamikaze drones and began to strike at the Russian occupiers. Russian occupants began to abandon damaged equipment and flee to the forest. The Russian assault was a failure. Ukrainian troops successfully repelled the invaders' assault. Here, the Russian occupiers tried to hide from a Ukrainian drone in a no longer combat-ready Ukrainian infantry vehicle, M2 Bradley. The occupiers did not know that they were under surveillance. Immediately, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone was sent there and struck the armored vehicle. Then there was an attack by another. The frightened Russians tried to shoot back and also ran around the car, running away from the drone, but in vain. The Russian tried to shoot down the drone like a baseball player and then threw a stick at it, but it was all in vain. The drone flew under an armored vehicle and neutralized the occupiers. Here, the Russian occupiers dug a hole for the tank to disguise it and protect it from Ukrainian artillery, but it didn't work out as expected. The Ukrainian artillery hit the target accurately. This tank was already well camouflaged, but it was not a big problem for Ukrainian scouts. With a powerful shot, they destroyed the enemy object. And this is the Kurakhove direction, where the Russian occupiers really wanted to capture Ukrainian positions, but it happened quite differently. Ukrainian defenders turned them into fireworks. Kurakhove direction, the Russian occupiers are calmly wandering around the destroyed Ukrainian settlement, but they do not even realize that a Ukrainian drone is watching them. When the occupiers entered the destroyed building, a kamikaze drone followed them. Well, for these occupiers, it was the last thing they could remember. The Russian armored personnel carrier brought the assault group and immediately came under attack by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. The first strike was very powerful. You can see pieces of metal flying off the armored vehicle. Another drone hit the hatch of an armored personnel carrier and completely destroyed it. Ukrainian town of Kurakhove. Ukrainian armed forces destroy Russian drone hub. Russian T-80 tank. They also started hunting for Russian soldiers. targeted attack on Russian heavy armored vehicles. And here is another Russian multi-purpose towing vehicle, light-armored MTLB. After the first hit, the Russian soldiers abandoned the vehicle and began to flee. The Ukrainian drone operator decided to destroy the equipment to the end and struck a decisive blow. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spots two occupiers looking for a place to hide. They find an old basement. Unaware that they are being followed, they hide there. This is a tempting target for the Ukrainian drone, and it heads there. After the strike, the building collapses, but the Russian soldiers manage to survive. They flee to an old house, but even there, they are attacked by Ukrainian drones. The first hit was not very successful. Then the drone operator delivers another blow, which becomes the last one. He destroys and burns the house with the occupiers. Here, the Russian occupiers in a T-80 tank hit a mine and damaged the track. After that, a Ukrainian drone hit the tank's hatch directly. This caused an explosive reaction. The tank caught fire and turned into hot scrap metal. Another Russian T-80 tank was abandoned by the Russians. Ukrainian drone operators are destroying it to prevent the occupiers from using it again. Russian logistics transport is also an important target for Ukrainian drones. Destroying Russian logistics makes it impossible to supply the occupiers with food, ammunition, and other equipment. Here, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone destroys a Russian bukhanka. Another destruction of the Russian bukhanka. Here the Russian occupier tried to jump out of the vehicle before colliding with the drone. Here, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone operator discovered a fully operational Russian T-80BM tank standing in the middle of the field. Most likely, the occupiers ran out of fuel and left it here. In order to prevent the occupiers from using it again, a targeted strike was made, which caused the tank to catch fire and then explode. The tank's turret was torn off by the blast. Kharkiv direction. During the clearing of the village, Ukrainian troops captured 3 Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian military made it clear to the occupiers that if they wanted to live, they had to leave the building with their hands up and without weapons and slowly move towards the Ukrainian soldiers. Only 3 Russian soldiers fulfilled the order. All the others who did not want to surrender and were sitting in the house were liquidated by 2 tank shots. Russian soldiers had a chance to save their lives, but they did not use it. During their offensive attempts, Russian occupants often hit Ukrainian mines. Roads and fields mined by Ukrainians become an unexpected surprise for Russian assault groups and heavy artillery. Russian armored vehicle with infantry hits a mine and loses control of the vehicle. Two more Russian armored personnel carriers run into minefields, then catch fire and burn completely. A Russian self-propelled artillery unit hits a mine, explodes, and then starts burning. Three Russian armored personnel carriers traveling along the same road where their other brigades recently exploded also hit mines. Russian light armored vehicle hits two mines at once and detonates. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone is chasing a new Russian T-90M tank, an MTLB multi-purpose towing vehicle light armored. Target successfully neutralized. Another Russian armored vehicle being pursued by Ukrainian kamikaze drone pilots. The Russian occupiers noticed that the drone was hunting them and decided to hide under the bridge and wait for it to stop, but they failed. The drone delivered a precise strike that neutralized the occupiers. The Russian occupier, looking for a safe hiding place, decided to hide in the basement of a building. Not expecting to be watched by a Ukrainian drone, he climbed into the basement, and a few minutes later, a Ukrainian drone arrived with a shell and dropped a bomb directly on the target. War is a great evil that kills hundreds of thousands of people. Russians must stop going to Ukraine in search of their deaths. They must destroy the center of evil, dictator Putin, to save their lives. A Russian armored personnel carrier with an assault team hits a mine, but despite the complete destruction of the vehicle, 6 Russian soldiers managed to escape. The Ukrainian military uses FPV kamikaze drones to completely destroy the occupiers. 3 Russian soldiers try to hide behind trees, but this does not help them either. Another assault group also hit 2 mines. A large convoy of Russian heavy equipment was on its way to storm Ukrainian positions, but after hitting mines, they began to change their route. Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone operators used the opportunity to start destroying Russian equipment and occupiers. Russians tried to shoot down a drone with an assault rifle, but failed. Russian soldiers hiding between the trees were attacked by drone shells. The Ukrainian attack drone Lelika 100 was also used to carry out devastating attacks. As well as a kamikaze drone attack on armored vehicles with Russian infantry. Successful elimination of a Russian assault group. And another armored personnel carrier that the Russian occupiers left in the forest belt. FPV drone collision with an armored vehicle. And a hunt for Russian armored fighting vehicles. And this is the Siversky direction. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance discovered several units of Russian heavy armored vehicles. Kamikaze drone operators immediately set about destroying the occupiers. This armored personnel carrier was landing Russian troops, and at the same time, a Ukrainian drone began dropping bombs right next to the occupiers. Russian militants and their equipment were successfully destroyed. It is a hub for Russian drone operators. The Ukrainian Air Force carried out an airstrike that completely destroyed the building, along with the occupiers. Kharkiv direction. Here, the Ukrainian military hunted for the logistics of Russian soldiers. Detected Russian armored personnel carrier immediately comes under Ukrainian attack. The target was destroyed and burned. Another Russian truck attacked by a kamikaze drone. The Ukrainian military also attacked the Russian occupiers on their way to rotation. One armored vehicle was successfully attacked. Other occupants tried to escape, but in vain, the armored vehicle was destroyed. And two more successful hits on Russian armored personnel carriers with infantry. The eastern front of the Ukrainian border, Russians decide to make a major assault on Ukrainian defense positions. Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drone takes off to meet Russian armored vehicles. Russian troops did not even have time to reach the forest belt of the Ukrainian military before they were attacked by drones. A Russian armored tank was also attacked by a kamikaze drone. After the first hit, the tank did not detonate, so it was decided to finish it off with another drone. The armor of the tanks could not withstand the precise hits of the drones. The column of Russian equipment was successfully broken up and destroyed. And here, the Ukrainian military is opening the season of the first snow, ruthlessly destroying the occupiers' armored vehicles, burning them and turning them into scrap metal. Here, the occupiers left their armored truck without even closing the door. The drone operator took advantage of this and made a targeted strike. A similar situation. After such attacks, the armored vehicle burns down in a matter of minutes. An unmovable tank is also a very attractive target for destruction. Kurakhove direction. Ukrainian intelligence spotted a Russian convoy moving to assault Ukrainian positions. Having raised kamikaze drones, Ukrainian operators began to attack Russian combat brigades. Ukrainian drone operators ruthlessly attacked Russians. Russian armored vehicles could not withstand the drone attack. Russian soldiers tried to save their lives, hiding among the trees. A Russian occupier on a buggy saw a drone hunting for him and stopped and tried to run away, but he failed. Only scrap metal remained at the site of the explosion. A Russian armored personnel carrier disguised as a green forest was not expecting the snow to fall quickly. And then, a Russian T-80 tank came under a brutal attack by two Ukrainian kamikaze drones. That's all for today, friends. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. This video was prepared by Hustler. See you soon.